Well, I know when you normally hear people's how we really met stories, it can be a little bit boring, but I promise you this story is well worth the watch. It is an incredible story, and it really has a lot to do with the anniversary of today, that being the 21st anniversary of Malice at the Palace, when the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons took their fight from on the court to in the stands and led to a whole lot of issues and a really dark day for the NBA. But just to show that there is light at the other side of the tunnel, I mean, there was a marriage that actually came from some of the instances following Malice at the Palace, and that is why we are so happy to have Kevin and Tori joining us today to talk all about it. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Hey.
Of course, full disclosure, Kevin, we know each other through my fiance, and she actually first told me the story about how the Malice at the Palace really impacted your marriage to Tori. And before we get into really that story of how you two really came to be a married couple, let's talk first about that night in November of 2004. The Pistons coming off a championship run. They're taking on the Indiana Pacers. They faced off in the playoffs that year. There's a lot of bitter rivalry going on. The game seemed like it was going to be a great matchup. Before we get into what happened with just under a minute left in that game, I mean, what was that vibe like in the stadium being there back in 2004?
It was great. The Pistons had been on a huge run of I've lost track of how many consecutive sellouts. Mm-hmm. It was a really cool time to work at the Palace. I mean, I had started there when they were still wearing turquoise, and it was not a great time to be there. So coming off of that championship series, I don't know. It was electric. I mean, every game was really intense. Fans were psyched every single game. I mean, we definitely worked there when the Pistons weren't so great and nobody seemed to care, but this was just different. I mean, people were hyped to be there. And plus, I mean, that's the team we beat to go into the championship. So I think people were psyched. I don't think anybody from Detroit particularly loves the Pacers. So that also fueled it, I think.
Yeah, it was an exciting time to work there.
Yeah, so you both, working at the Palace while the games are going on and everything's kind of settling in. I mean, what specifically did you guys do at the Palace before we get into how you guys ended up kind of becoming a couple?
Yeah, so we helped organizations that would come in to do fundraising for whatever group they were part of. We would help them run concession stands and fundraise. And so we were both in a role related to that. And so we managed concession stands every night, got to see lots of different events. But one of the main reoccurring events was a Pistons game.
Mm-hmm. And just like the one that was on November 19th, 2004, again, there was a lot going on in the court. The Pacers were starting to pull away in that game. There's just a minute left. Ben Wallace, we've all kind of seen it. Whether you follow the Pistons or not, you've probably seen those shots of Ben Wallace going up for the layup, Ron Artest fouling him really hard, and then all heck really breaking loose at the Palace of Auburn Hills. When things first started to really pop off, when the first drink hit Ron Artest and everybody was starting to get into a panic, the players were starting to go into the stands as well. I mean, where were you guys when that all really started happening?
So I was running the center court kitchen, which was the area that served all the patrons who had seats on courtside, right? So we had a kitchen in there, and we had a bunch of servers that would run back and forth, and we shared a hallway with the visiting team's locker room. So, I mean, you would walk out of our door, and there's a Pacers locker room right there. Wow. And then you just head down the hall maybe 100 feet, and you were in the arena. So by that point in the game, we were kind of wrapping up our night. We usually cut off most of our sales by the start of the fourth quarter or soon thereafter, certainly alcohol. And at that point, a lot of our servers were counting their tips, people were packing up stuff, counting inventory, and we had the game on in the corner TV, so we always kind of paid attention to what was going on in the game. And it was just, people were just in disbelief, like, oh, wow, this is getting crazy. And, once it really built up, once they poured into the stands and started fighting fans, and they started pushing people down the hall and throwing chairs at the Pacers, we slammed all of our doors shut. We had 3 that led into that hallway, so we had to slam those shut and lock them. We're like, hey, let's just keep everybody inside and not make this any worse for them or us. But then, by virtue of closing and locking our doors, we were kind of stuck in there for probably an hour or two longer than we usually would be. Wow. Because then the Auburn Hills and Lake Orion police came in and they were trying to get the Pacers out of there. Well, also it sounded like they were maybe trying to arrest somebody, but they didn't, and they were just trying to handle the chaos, which meant we had to stay where we were, locked in the kitchen. But you were up in the concourse.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily notice anything that was that different. I think I remember being called to the front of the concession stand because we had TVs on either side of the concession stand, and someone said like, "Oh my gosh, look what's going on!" And I remember there being a lot of energy on the concourse, but it wasn't necessarily, I guess, more or less energy than I normally would experience on the concourse. It was a really exciting time to work there. So Kevin's experience was much more unique than mine. Mine was just an exciting night, but not really realizing all the events that had happened down on the court.
Well, that is really interesting because, like I said, the Malice at the Palace is something that a lot of NBA fans very much realize. And I'm sure a lot of people who were around Detroit and the Michigan area around that time as well remember it as just a really huge news event, let alone a sports event. And the fact that, you're kind of there in person and not really understanding or seeing what's going on and seeing how bad it was really, I mean, that's super interesting and a really unique perspective. I guess kind of looking back on it now, I mean, is it a little bit jarring to see just how big of a situation that was?
I think so. It was it was definitely unusual. It was exciting, a little bit I would say a little nerve-wracking, but
Hmm.
also it was handled really well. So by all the people that were involved. So I felt like it was, from my perspective, it was managed and contained.
Hmm. Right. Well, again, at this point, Malice at the Palace is maybe already ended. The fans have finally left the building. You guys are finally able to kind of get out of the stadium and go back to your regular lives. Just kind of thinking back to that, I mean, at what point, what was sort of the relationship between the two of you? I guess I should ask. Once everything's kind of ended, I mean, you guys still weren't really super close or anything like that.
No, I mean we worked for the same company. We had basically the same exact job as one another. We would file our paperwork in the office at the end of the night in the same office, make copies. I'd say hi to her, she'd say hi to me, but I wouldn't really say that we were friends per se at that point in time. Actually, I think I knew your brother better at that point, who also worked there.
Yeah.
That's also worth noting that all four of my mom's kids worked at the Palace at one point or another, and all three of her parents' kids worked at the Palace too.
Yeah.
So it's a family business, I guess.
Right. Yeah, you guys obviously linked in a bunch of different
between the
ways,
two
kind of
of
leading
us,
up.
we have
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And then with Malice of the Palace happening, there's a lot of talk about, the rest of the season for the Pistons and Pacers. And it all kind of came to a head a few weeks later when the Pacers, I should say, actually came back to the Palace. And that's where our story leads us now. What happened specifically when the Pacers came back for another game in Detroit? A lot of speculation about how this would go following Malice at the Palace. There was a situation that ended up happening, though.
Yeah, for sure. So I was March 25th, and the Pacers came back to the Pistons or the Palace for the first time, and they were short some players because I think it was like 150 game
Hmm.
suspensions between the Pistons and the Pacers, but still, I think our test was out. I think Jermaine O'Neal was out. But still, it was, people were thinking, is another fight going to break out? Or are we going to throw beer cups at them? And I mean, we have been prepped to know, like, hey, just fans might get crazy. Just try to keep it friendly, keep it cool. Um, that night, I was working up on the concourse also, and a fan decided that it would be, I don't know, wise or funny or whatever to call in a bomb threat to the Pacers locker room, and they took it very seriously, and the security locked the building down. Some fans were already in the building at that point in time. We were instructed to kind of shelter in place. And so Tori and I went to an area which was kind of like a back room that had a walk-in cooler for kegs, as well as a bunch of Dippin' Dots coolers, like chest freezers.
Right.
And so for about it was 90 minutes or 2 hours when they were in like the lockdown period, we just kind of sat in there with some other people that worked with us and got to talking. And realized we had some similarities, we had some things in common, similar goals, and kind of hit it off. At least in my mind, I think that's when I was smitten.
Yeah.
Tori, you might
Yeah.
want to, back him up on that one.
Yeah, that's when we fell in love.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it was this cool little, I don't know, it was this kind of like dingy nook of like a storage area where oftentimes during the game we would take breaks. And a lot of times, I mean, there were a lot of different people that worked for this company, but a lot of the people there were college students. So we're there kind of talking about our night, different areas that we're working in, things we've experienced. And so it was routine that we'd go there and we would sit on these big cooler chests filled with Dippin' Dots ice cream and, eat our break food and just kind of, chat it up. But this particular night when we were sheltering in place and we didn't have a lot of information either,
Sure.
we were like, okay, it's a bomb threat, but we're still here. And, what's the news? What's the plan? And we were just told to stay put, they're investigating. And then we stayed put for a long time.
Yeah.
And just sat on those coolers and chatted up. And that was really the first time that we spent a significant amount of time together.
Yeah, that's just such a lovely story. I mean, did you guys start dating immediately afterwards? I mean, what's sort of the timeline following that game, or spending so much time in kind of an enclosed space together?
We used to joke that I was dating her for about a year before she was dating me because I was nuts about her. So I think I was like immediately head over heels, and we went to college together. We started hanging out on campus together. We would often go out to eat after Pistons games at Steak and Shake because it was like the only place that was still open after a Pistons game had cleared out.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time at the Steak and Shake around the corner. And then a couple of years, 7 years later, we got married. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we were friends for a long time. In my mind, we were friends for a long time before we started dating. But that was really the start of it, is a friendship where I still think we're still really good friends. Yeah. And that started because of the Pistons and sitting
because of our tests. Yeah.
Yeah. Who knows if we would have really crossed paths and spent that amount of time getting to know each other if that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was going to be kind of my next question for the two of you. I mean, do you think about the how many circumstances needed to happen? I mean, you needed for the Malice at the Palace to happen. Then you needed that fan to call in a bomb threat for you guys to be kind of sheltered in place. And then you guys needed to actually shelter in place in order to be where you guys are today. How crazy. I would be thinking about that every single moment of every single day if I was you guys.
It's insane to me. I'm a numbers guy. I work with numbers all day. I think of statistics and probability, right. And just the fact that had Ron Artest not pushed Ben Wallace on an inconsequential layup in a game that was basically over. It had a minute left. They were down by 15. This game does not matter. It's over. Just finish up and go home. But had Ron Artest not pushed him and had a Pistons fan not thrown a beer cup at Ron Artest moments later and had it not spilled into this chaos, and then months later had some maniac called in a bomb threat of all things, who knows where I'd be, how well I'd know you, whether or not we'd be married, whether or not we'd have the kids we have. It's crazy to think that we have Ron Artest to thank for that, in a way.
Right.
I mean, I'd like to think that we would have run into each other,
Sure.
at another time, but who's to say? So, I mean, in the end, glad that it happened, at least in terms of for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, again, I told everybody that this was definitely going to be a how we met story that you wanted to stick around for. I hope I delivered on that. This has been such a pleasure. Kevin and Tori, thank you both so much for agreeing to do this interview with us. And again, as we commemorate the 21st anniversary of Malice at the Palace, it is important to remember that some good did come out of that event. So Kevin and Tori, thank you both so much for stopping by today. We so do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Of course.